United States, 2024. Part 1. The Struggle. David Reynolds had always been the embodiment of success and independence. As a leading software engineer at a top tech company in New York City, he lived a life many dreamed of. His days were filled with challenging projects, late-night brainstorming sessions, and the satisfaction of seeing his work come to life. David's apartment, a sleek modern space on the 25th floor of a high-rise, reflected his personality. Minimalist, efficient, and state-of-the-art. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline, a testament to his hard-earned achievements. David was not just a man of science and technology. He was a man of logic and reason. He prided himself on his ability to analyze and solve problems, whether they were technical glitches or personal dilemmas. To him, faith was a crutch for the weak, a notion he dismissed with casual disdain. He often engaged in debates with his religious friends, particularly Mark, who was as devout as David was skeptical. These debates were always good-natured but left no doubt about David's stance. There was no room for the intangible in his meticulously ordered world. One cold January morning, everything changed. David was driving to a business meeting when a patch of black ice sent his car skidding into oncoming traffic. The impact was brutal, and the aftermath devastating. He woke up in the hospital days later, surrounded by the sterile smell of antiseptics and the beeping of medical machines. The doctors delivered the grim news. His spinal cord was severely damaged, leaving him a tetraplegic. Lying in the hospital bed, David felt a profound sense of loss. The vibrant, dynamic life he had known was suddenly ripped away, replaced by a nightmare of immobility and dependence. His body, once so responsive and powerful, was now an uncooperative burden. He could barely move his fingers, let alone walk or take care of himself. The reality of his condition hit him like a tidal wave, drowning him in despair. Days turned into weeks, and David was transferred to a rehabilitation center. The sterile, impersonal environment of the hospital gave way to the slightly more hopeful but equally challenging atmosphere of rehab. Here, David faced a new routine. Grueling physical therapy sessions designed to coax his body into regaining some semblance of function. Each session was a painful reminder of his limitations, each small victory overshadowed by the enormity of his loss. The rehab center was a place of struggle and resilience. The walls were adorned with motivational posters, but to David, they felt like cruel mockery. "Believe in yourself," one read. "Every day is a new beginning," proclaimed another. But David could not find it in himself to believe these platitudes. His days were a blur of therapy sessions, medical appointments, and restless nights. The once confident, assertive man was now a shadow of himself, consumed by bitterness and frustration. The physical pain was immense, but it was the emotional agony that truly tormented him. He had always valued his independence, his ability to control his destiny. Now, he was reliant on others for everything, from getting out of bed to brushing his teeth. His parents, who lived in a different state, visited as often as they could, their worried faces only adding to his sense of guilt and helplessness. Mark, his best friend, was a constant presence, offering support and encouragement. But even Mark's unwavering positivity couldn't pierce the darkness that enveloped David. When David finally returned to his apartment, it no longer felt like home. The place that once symbolized his success and independence was now a prison. The spacious living room, with its sleek furniture and high-tech gadgets, seemed cold and uninviting. The wheelchair-accessible modifications only served to remind him of his new reality. Every corner, every piece of furniture, every view from the windows reminded him of what he had lost. His days at home were monotonous and grueling. The simplest tasks became monumental challenges. Rolling from his bed to his wheelchair, maneuvering through doorways, and even using the bathroom required assistance. He had a team of caregivers who came in shifts, helping him with daily activities. Despite their kindness, David couldn't shake the feeling of resentment. He hated being dependent, hated the pity he saw in their eyes. His best friend Mark visited frequently, bringing a touch of normalcy to his otherwise bleak existence. Mark was a devout Christian, and while David appreciated his company, he dreaded the inevitable conversations about faith. Mark would often talk about the power of prayer and the strength that could be found in Jesus. David would respond with his usual skepticism, dismissing the idea of a higher power with a wave of his hand. One evening, as they sat in the dimly lit living room, Mark tried once more to reach out to him. "You need to find something to hold on to, David," he said gently. "Something that gives you hope." David's response was immediate and bitter. "Hope? What hope is there for someone like me? I'm a prisoner in my own body." Mark leaned forward, his eyes filled with compassion. "There is always hope, David, even in the darkest times. You just have to be open to it." David turned away, unable to face his friend's earnest gaze. "Hope is a luxury for people who can afford it, Mark. Right now, I can't." As Mark left that night, David felt more alone than ever. He wheeled himself to the window and looked out at the city lights. Once, they had filled him with a sense of wonder and possibility. Now, they seemed distant and indifferent. For the first time in his life, David felt truly defeated. Part 2. The Encounter. The rehabilitation center was a place where lives were rebuilt, one small step at a time. It was a sprawling facility with bright, airy rooms designed to inspire hope and healing. The walls were painted in calming hues of blue and green, adorned with photographs of former patients who had triumphed over their injuries. The common areas were filled with the hum of activity. Patients engaged in various therapies, families offering encouragement, and medical staff moving purposefully between rooms. David's physical therapist, Laura, was a beacon of positivity in this challenging environment. She had been working at the center for over a decade and had seen countless patients struggle and persevere. Her demeanor was both professional and warm, her encouraging words often the only bright spot in a patient's day. Laura had an uncanny ability to connect with her patients, understanding not just their physical limitations but also the emotional turmoil that accompanied them. From the moment she met David, Laura knew his journey would be arduous. She could see the anger and frustration simmering beneath his surface, the way he clenched his jaw during therapy sessions, and the bitter glint in his eyes when he spoke about his condition. She understood that for David, the physical challenges were compounded by his fierce independence and the sense of helplessness that now engulfed him. One day, after a particularly grueling session, Laura sat beside David as he rested. "I know this is incredibly hard for you, David," she said softly. "But I've seen people come through even the darkest times. You might find it helpful to join our support group. It's a place where you can share your experiences and hear from others who understand what you're going through." David was skeptical. The idea of sitting in a room full of strangers, talking about his feelings, seemed almost unbearable. But Laura's earnest expression and the exhaustion of constant resistance wore him down. Reluctantly, he agreed to give it a try. The support group met in a cozy room at the rehabilitation center. Comfortable chairs were arranged in a circle, and the walls were lined with shelves filled with books on coping strategies and inspirational stories. A large window let in natural light, creating a warm and inviting atmosphere. The group was a mix of individuals, each with their own unique story of struggle and resilience. Some were wheelchair-bound, others used crutches or prosthetics. Despite their differences, they all shared a common bond of overcoming adversity. David wheeled himself into the room, feeling awkward and out of place. He chose a chair near the window, hoping to remain somewhat detached from the proceedings. As the group members introduced themselves, David listened with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. There was Emily, a young woman who had lost her leg in a motorcycle accident. Tom, an older man who had suffered a stroke, and several others, each with their own tale of pain and perseverance. Then there was John. He was a tall, rugged man in his early 40s, with a kind face and a warm smile. John's story was one of the most compelling. A construction worker by trade, he had been paralyzed from the waist down after a scaffolding collapse. Like David, John had faced a long and difficult road to recovery. But unlike David, He radiated a sense of peace and acceptance that was hard to ignore. During one of the sessions, John spoke about his journey. "There was a time when I felt completely lost," he began, his voice steady and calm. "I was angry, bitter, and full of despair. I couldn't understand why this had happened to me. But then I found something that changed everything. I found faith." David shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his skepticism rising to the surface. Yet something about John's demeanor compelled him to listen. John talked about the dark period after his accident, how he had felt abandoned and hopeless. He described the day he had turned to Jesus, not out of belief, but out of sheer desperation. "I prayed for the first time in my life," John continued. "I asked for strength, for guidance, for a reason to keep going. And slowly, I began to feel a change. It wasn't an overnight miracle, but a gradual shift. I started to see hope where there had been none." David couldn't help but feel a pang of curiosity. He had always dismissed faith as a crutch, yet here was John, a man who had faced unimaginable hardship, speaking with conviction about the power of belief. It stirred something deep within David, a flicker of possibility that he couldn't quite ignore. That night, back in the confines of his apartment, David found himself reflecting on John's words. The city lights outside his window twinkled, casting a soft glow into the room. David lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the thoughts swirling in his mind. Could there really be something more? Was it possible that faith could offer him the hope he so desperately needed? The next few days were a blur of therapy sessions and routine tasks, but the seed of curiosity had been planted. David found himself looking forward to the support group meetings, eager to hear more about John's experiences. During one session, he finally summoned the courage to ask John a question that had been gnawing at him. "How can you believe in something you can't see?" David's voice was tinged with skepticism, but also with genuine curiosity. John smiled, a patient and understanding expression on his face. "Faith isn't about seeing, David. It's about believing in the possibility of something greater than ourselves. It's about hope and the belief that we are not alone in our struggles." David nodded slowly, mulling over John's words. It was a concept that challenged everything he had ever believed, but for the first time he found himself open to the idea. The encounters with John and the other group members began to chip away at the walls he had built around his heart. The transformation within David was slow but undeniable. When Mark invited him to attend church one Sunday, David hesitated but eventually agreed. The church was a small, welcoming place, with wooden pews and stained glass windows that cast colorful patterns on the floor. The congregation was a mix of families, elderly couples, and young individuals, all united in their faith. David wheeled himself into the church, feeling out of place yet oddly comforted by the warmth of the people around him. The pastor, a gentle man with a soothing voice, spoke about miracles and the power of faith. His words resonated with David, stirring emotions he hadn't felt in a long time. At the end of the service, the pastor invited anyone who needed prayer to come forward. David hesitated, his heart pounding. But with Mark by his side, offering silent support, he wheeled himself to the front. As the pastor prayed over him, David closed his eyes and whispered a desperate prayer of his own. "Jesus, if you're real, help me. I can't do this alone." In that moment, David felt a warmth spread through his body, a sensation he couldn't explain. Tears streamed down his face as he opened his eyes, looking at Mark, who was staring at him with wide eyes. Slowly, David began to move his fingers. The congregation gasped, and a sense of awe filled the room. David's journey was far from over, but in that moment, he felt a spark of hope ignite within him. The encounter with faith, with the possibility of something greater than himself, had begun to transform his life. Part 3. The Turning Point. The city outside David's apartment was alive with activity. The twinkling lights and distant hum of traffic were a stark contrast to the stillness within David's apartment. The space that once felt like a sanctuary now seemed distant and alien. David lay in bed, his mind racing with thoughts of faith and the possibility of something more. The support group meetings and John's testimony had planted a seed of curiosity, but it was the Sunday service that had truly shaken him. The warmth he felt during the pastor's prayer lingered, a comforting but confusing sensation. For the first time in months, he felt a flicker of hope, a tiny flame of possibility that perhaps his life could change. Yet, skepticism and fear clashed with this newfound hope, creating a tumultuous storm within him. David's mind was a battlefield of emotions. He replayed the pastor's sermon over and over in his head, dissecting every word. The idea of a higher power, of a divine intervention, was something he had dismissed as naive. But the movement in his fingers, the gasps of the congregation, and the overwhelming sense of peace he felt were undeniable. Could faith really offer him a path to healing? Unable to sleep, David turned on his bedside lamp and reached for his phone. He found himself searching online for stories of miraculous recoveries and accounts of people who had experienced similar sensations. The internet was filled with testimonials of faith and healing, each story echoing John's experience in some way. David read through them, feeling a mix of awe and disbelief. The next morning, David arrived at the rehabilitation center with a different mindset. The routine of physical therapy seemed less burdensome than before. Laura noticed the change in his demeanor immediately. His eyes, which had previously been clouded with frustration, now held a glimmer of curiosity and determination. During their session, David hesitated before speaking. "Laura, I've been thinking a lot about faith and miracles lately. I don't know if it's just wishful thinking, but I want to understand more about this. I want to believe that there's something beyond this." Laura's face lit up with a warm smile. "That's a significant step, David. Belief often starts with a willingness to explore. If you want, I can help you find resources or connect you with people who have had similar experiences." David nodded, his resolve strengthening. He knew that exploring this path wouldn't be easy, but he felt a strong urge to understand what had stirred within him. Laura provided him with a list of books and articles on faith and healing, and David promised himself he would delve into them. David spent the next few days engrossed in reading. The books Laura had recommended were filled with stories of faith, miracles, and personal transformation. He learned about people who had faced dire circumstances and found hope through their beliefs. Each story resonated with him on a deep level, stirring emotions he had long suppressed. In his living room, surrounded by the stark modernity of his apartment, David felt a profound disconnect between his material world and the spiritual journey he was embarking on. The contrast was striking. His sleek, impersonal surroundings felt increasingly foreign as he delved into topics of faith and healing. He began to see his apartment not just as a physical space, but as a symbol of his past life, a life he was slowly starting to question and possibly leave behind. His evenings were spent in quiet contemplation. He would sit in his wheelchair by the large window, watching the city lights while reflecting on his readings. He started keeping a journal, jotting down his thoughts and feelings. The journal became a safe space where he could explore his doubts and hopes without judgment. David's participation in the support group became more engaged. He began to share his thoughts and feelings, opening up about his struggle with faith. His willingness to discuss these topics led to deeper conversations with other group members. John, in particular, became a source of inspiration and guidance. One evening, David approached John after the group meeting. "I've been reading a lot about faith," David said, his voice tentative. "I want to understand how to pray and what it really means to have faith. Can you help me?" John's eyes brightened with encouragement. "Of course. Faith is a personal journey, and everyone's path is different. It's about finding what resonates with you and building a relationship with a higher power. Start by speaking from your heart. Prayer doesn't have to be formal or complicated. It's about being honest and open." David took John's advice to heart. He began to incorporate prayer into his daily routine, using it as a way to express his hopes, fears, and gratitude. At first, it felt strange and awkward, but as time went on, he found solace in the practice. He prayed for strength, for healing, and for clarity. Each prayer was a step toward reconciling his old beliefs with the new possibilities he was exploring. With Mark's encouragement, David attended church regularly. Each service provided a sense of community and connection that he had been missing. The sermons were filled with messages of hope, love, and redemption. The church became a place where David could reflect on his journey and find comfort in the shared experiences of others. One Sunday, the pastor spoke about the importance of faith in times of adversity. Faith is not just about believing in miracles, but about trusting in the process of healing and transformation. It's about finding peace amidst the storm and believing that there is a purpose for our struggles. David listened intently, feeling a deep resonance with the message. The idea of trusting in the process, of finding peace despite his circumstances, was a concept he had been grappling with. It was a turning point in his journey, a moment when he felt a profound shift in his understanding of faith. As he wheeled himself out of the church that day, David felt a sense of clarity and purpose. The path ahead was still uncertain, but he was no longer afraid to walk it. He was ready to embrace the possibility of healing and transformation, guided by the newfound faith that had begun to take root in his heart. Part 4. The Miracle. The church was bathed in a soft, golden light as the Sunday service drew to a close. The air was filled with the faint aroma of incense, mingling with the scent of fresh flowers placed on the altar. The congregation, a sea of faces filled with hope and reverence, sat quietly as the pastor invited anyone in need of prayer to come forward. The sound of rustling and murmuring filled the room as people shifted in their seats, and David felt his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. David's wheelchair, usually a symbol of his limitations, now felt like an anchor holding him back from a leap of faith. His best friend, Mark, sat beside him, offering silent encouragement with a steady hand on his shoulder. David had come to appreciate Mark's unwavering support and the quiet strength he exuded, which was especially comforting in moments of uncertainty. When the pastor's gaze landed on David, he felt a jolt of nervous energy. The pastor was a tall man with a calm demeanor, his voice resonant and soothing. As he spoke, David could feel the weight of his words, the promise of something greater just beyond reach. He took a deep breath and wheeled himself forward, making his way to the altar. The congregation's eyes followed him, and a hush fell over the room. At the altar, David was surrounded by the soft glow of candlelight and the quiet murmur of prayers. The pastor laid his hands gently on David's shoulders, his touch warm and reassuring. The pastor began to pray, his voice a comforting presence in the stillness. "Lord, we ask for your healing touch upon David. Grant him strength, restore his body, and fill him with your peace." David closed his eyes, allowing the words to wash over him. He felt a strange and profound warmth spreading through his body, a sensation that seemed to transcend physical boundaries. It was as if a gentle current was flowing through him, easing the tension in his muscles and bringing a sense of calm to his mind. Tears began to stream down his face as he whispered a fervent prayer of his own. "Jesus, if you're real, show me a sign. I need your help." As the pastor's prayer continued, David became aware of a subtle, tingling sensation in his limbs. It started as a faint buzz, like the gentle hum of electricity, but gradually intensified. The feeling was unfamiliar and exhilarating, and David could hardly believe what was happening. His fingers, which had been motionless for months, began to twitch and move. The sensation spread to his arms and legs, and he felt a surge of energy and possibility that he had not experienced in a long time. The congregation watched in stunned silence as David's fingers moved more purposefully. Gasps and murmurs of awe filled the room, and Mark's eyes widened in amazement. David's heart raced as he willed his body to respond, to prove that this wasn't just a fleeting sensation. He focused intently, willing his arms to lift and his legs to move. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, his muscles began to respond. The news of David's experience at the church spread quickly, and the rehabilitation center became a place of heightened anticipation and excitement. David's medical team, initially skeptical, approached his recovery with cautious optimism. The physical therapists and doctors were eager to see if the progress witnessed at the church would continue. David's physical therapy sessions took on a new energy. With each session, he could feel his body responding in ways he had thought were impossible. His therapists, including Laura, were astonished by the rapid progress. The exercises that had once been excruciatingly difficult now seemed more manageable, and David's determination fueled his progress. One morning, Laura guided David through a series of exercises designed to improve his strength and coordination. David moved with a newfound sense of purpose, his movements more fluid and confident. He was able to lift his arms higher, maneuver his wheelchair with greater ease, and even stand with the aid of a walker. The improvements were dramatic and unprecedented, leaving everyone in the rehabilitation center amazed. David's apartment was undergoing a transformation, both physically and emotionally. The once cold and impersonal space was now filled with a sense of hope and possibility. The sleek modern design of the apartment took on new meaning as David began to envision a future where he could once again navigate his home with greater independence. The living room, which had previously felt like a prison, now seemed like a space of potential and growth. David's daily routine included physical exercises, prayer, and reflection. His journal, once filled with doubts and fears, now chronicled his journey of faith and healing. He wrote about his experiences, the progress he was making, and the profound sense of gratitude he felt. David's interactions with his caregivers and friends were filled with a new sense of optimism. He began to engage more actively in conversations, sharing his experiences and the impact of faith on his recovery. His story became an inspiration to those around him, and he found joy in helping others who were struggling with similar challenges. As David's recovery continued, he became an active member of the church community. The congregation embraced his story with open hearts, and David found solace and strength in the supportive network of fellow believers. He participated in community events, sharing his testimony and offering encouragement to others who were facing difficult times. One evening, the church hosted a community event to celebrate the miracles and transformations within their congregation. David was invited to speak, and as he stood at the podium, he looked out at the sea of faces, each one reflecting a different journey of faith and healing. With a voice filled with emotion and gratitude, David addressed the crowd. "My journey has been one of incredible challenge and transformation. I was once a man who believed only in what I could see and touch. But through faith, I have experienced a miracle. I have witnessed the power of prayer and the strength that comes from believing in something greater than ourselves." The crowd erupted in applause, and David felt a profound sense of fulfillment. His journey, from skepticism to faith, from despair to hope, had come full circle. He had embraced the possibility of healing and found a new purpose in sharing his story. The miracle that had begun at the altar of the church had led to a new chapter in his life, one filled with hope, faith, and a renewed sense of possibility. Part 5. The New Beginning. Setting: Rehabilitation Center. Therapy Room. The Rehabilitation Center was now abuzz with excitement. David's remarkable progress had become the talk of the facility. The therapy room, once a place of struggle and routine, had transformed into a space of hope and transformation. The bright walls and large windows seemed to reflect the optimism that filled the room. David was in the middle of a session with Laura, working on exercises designed to improve his strength and mobility. The floor was covered with mats, and various pieces of equipment, from resistance bands to balance balls, were neatly arranged along the walls. Laura moved with a sense of purpose, guiding David through each exercise with encouraging words and gentle corrections. "Great job, David!" Laura cheered as David managed to lift his legs slightly while seated on a therapy bench. "You're making fantastic progress. I can't believe how far you've come in such a short time." David's face beamed with a mixture of pride and disbelief. His physical improvements were nothing short of miraculous, but the emotional and psychological changes were equally profound. The sense of empowerment and renewed hope he felt was evident in his every movement and interaction. During one of their breaks, Laura and David chatted about his journey. David spoke candidly about the transformation he had experienced, both physically and spiritually. "I never thought I'd be able to move like this again," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "It's like a dream come true. And it's not just the physical changes. I've discovered a new perspective on life." Laura nodded, her eyes reflecting her admiration and support. "It's incredible to see how your faith has played such a crucial role in your recovery. It's a testament to the power of belief and perseverance." David's apartment had become a vibrant reflection of his journey. The once sterile environment was now filled with personal touches and symbols of his newfound faith. Religious artwork adorned the walls, and a small corner of the living room had been transformed into a prayer and meditation space. Soft lighting and comfortable cushions created a serene atmosphere where David could reflect and connect with his spiritual side. The living room also served as a gathering place for David's friends and family. Mark, Laura, and other supporters frequently visited, offering companionship and celebrating David's milestones. The atmosphere was one of warmth and camaraderie, a stark contrast to the isolation David had once felt. One evening, as the sun set and bathed the room in a golden glow, David hosted a small gathering to express his gratitude to those who had supported him throughout his journey. The room was filled with laughter, conversation, and the clinking of glasses as people enjoyed a simple yet heartfelt meal. David stood up to address his guests, his heart swelling with appreciation. "I want to thank each and every one of you for being here with me today. Your support and faith have been instrumental in my journey. This recovery is not just a personal victory, but a shared one. I'm grateful for the love, encouragement, and prayers that have helped me through." The room erupted in applause, and David's eyes glistened with tears. He felt a profound sense of belonging and connection, knowing that he was not alone in his journey. David's story had begun to spread beyond the walls of the rehabilitation center and church. He was invited to speak at various events, sharing his testimony and inspiring others with his journey of faith and healing. One such event was held at the local community center, a venue known for hosting inspirational talks and workshops. The community center was a bustling place, filled with people from diverse backgrounds. The main hall was decorated with banners and colorful streamers, and rows of chairs were set up facing a stage where David would speak. The air was charged with anticipation as attendees settled into their seats, eager to hear David's story. When David took the stage, he was met with a warm round of applause. He looked out at the audience, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement. The room was filled with individuals who were seeking hope and inspiration, and David was determined to share his story in a way that would resonate with them. He began by recounting his journey from skepticism to faith, detailing the challenges he had faced and the miraculous recovery he had experienced. "There was a time when I felt hopeless and trapped by my circumstances," David shared. "But through faith, I discovered a strength I didn't know I had. It wasn't just about physical healing. It was about finding a purpose and a reason to believe in something greater than myself." As David spoke, the audience listened intently, their expressions reflecting a range of emotions, from curiosity and skepticism to hope and inspiration. David's honesty and vulnerability created a powerful connection, and he could see the impact his words were having. David's ongoing recovery and faith journey led him to participate in a special service at the church. The church had decided to dedicate a service to celebrate and reflect on the miracles and transformations within their congregation. The sanctuary was decorated with flowers and candles, creating a serene and celebratory atmosphere. The service was filled with music, prayer, and testimonies from various members of the congregation. David was invited to share his story as part of the service, and he took the opportunity to express his gratitude and reflect on the significance of his journey. Standing at the podium, David spoke with a deep sense of humility and appreciation. "My recovery has been nothing short of miraculous. It's a testament to the power of faith and the incredible support I've received from this community. I believe that each of us has the potential for transformation, and it's through faith that we find the strength to overcome our challenges." The congregation responded with a standing ovation, their applause resonating throughout the sanctuary. David's heart swelled with joy and gratitude as he looked around at the faces of those who had supported him and celebrated his journey. The sense of community and shared faith was overwhelming, and David felt a profound connection to everyone present. As David's recovery continued, he began to envision a future filled with possibilities. His physical improvements allowed him to engage in activities he had once thought impossible. He started taking short walks with the aid of a walker, exploring his neighborhood and enjoying the simple pleasures of life. David also began volunteering at the rehabilitation center, sharing his story with new patients and offering support to those facing similar challenges. His experiences and insights provided a source of encouragement and hope to others, and he found fulfillment in helping others navigate their own journeys of recovery and faith. In his personal life, David's relationships deepened and flourished. His bond with Mark, Laura, and his family grew stronger as they continued to support and celebrate each other. David's faith became a central part of his life, guiding his actions and shaping his outlook. David's journey from skepticism to faith, from despair to hope, had transformed not only his physical condition but also his entire perspective on life. He had embraced the possibility of miracles and found a renewed sense of purpose and connection. The road ahead was filled with promise, and David faced it with a heart full of gratitude and a spirit ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of faith and healing. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment below, and don't forget to like and share this video with friends and family. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories and updates. Until the next faith-filled story, God bless you.